So, welcome everyone warmly to one of the many exciting OECD Forum on Due Diligence in the Garment and Footwear Sector 2025 site sessions titled Addressing Environmental and Labor Rights Risks, Engaging Stakeholders Through Rights Holder-Based Monitoring for Effective Due Diligence, presented to you by the project partners. Well, the multiple project partners. Bangladesh Labour Foundation, FEMNET, Südwind Institute, Inkota Netzwerk, Hej Support, Mondial, WageIndicator Foundation, the Bangladesh Institute of Labour Studies, and ESDO, the Environment and Social Development Organization from Bangladesh. My name is Lavinia Muth. I am part of German women's rights NGO FEMNET, and I will be moderating today's session. Our aim is to create a comfortable and open space for discussion. We will explore innovative insights from a pretty promising approach in due diligence, which does not only talk about centering workers and communities by offering data on them, it actually shows data not only about them, but from them. My colleague Dani, maybe you can raise your hand or use an emoji as reaction. She will synchronously monitor the chat box, and we all encourage you to use the chat box for interaction. This session, as I said before, will explore the intersection of so-called worker-based monitoring, short for WBM, and community-based monitoring, short for CBM. In the context of the EU Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence, we also call this directive CSDDD, highlighting key findings from worker and community perspectives through presentations, interactive discussions, and a panel Q&A at the end of the session. So note down your questions. We will later have room for that. Within this interactive session, we aim to foster dialogue on challenges, eventual solutions or promising solutions, and hopefully actionable steps for meaningful stakeholder engagement in sustainable supply chains. We are also thrilled to have such a diverse group of organizations and participants joining us today, bringing very valuable perspectives from around the world to this important discussion. Please be reminded that this session is being recorded and will be publicly available on YouTube afterwards. Feel free to have the camera on or off, whatever feels comfortable or whatever your internet connection is able to do. As I said before, we would really like to also encourage you to engage via the chat box and also using emojis as reactions, right? The emojis you can find on the bar in Zoom below reactions. We will test this together in a sec because it's a lot of fun actually with so many folks in an online space. Also, to make this webinar as inclusive and accessible as possible, you can obviously also use Zoom's automated translation and subtitles feature. For the ones who don't know this feature, it allows you to follow along in your preferred language with subtitles. Otherwise, there's Daniela who's monitoring the chat, and in case you have any uncertainties or unclarities, please feel free to directly contact Daniela or just use the chat box for interaction. So now I would like to run a little test, and please check the bar in Zoom and check where the react or reactions button is. And I'm going to give you 20 seconds, okay? And you use an emoji, of your choice, which describes how you feel about today's session, okay? 20 seconds, and then I count 1, 2, 3, and hopefully everybody is going to use one of the emojis. And it's going to be, hopefully, a colorful, diverse screen. Okay, 20 seconds are already over. Folks are already using it. Awesome. I think we all got it and understood it, right? Beautiful. Yeah, please feel free, because specifically folks who present, you know, and are sharing the screen cannot see the chat box. So it's very helpful, you know, to receive some emotions and reactions while presenting in the online space. So now I will pass the mic to my colleague Louise from FEMNET, who will provide a brief overview of the collective project we are talking about. Louise, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lavinia. Can everybody hear me? Nice, thanks. Yeah, happy to welcome you all to this session also from my side. I will briefly give a short overview of our project so that you all know what we're talking about. Let me jump right in. First of all, why did we start this project? I don't want to go into too much detail here because I'm sure most of you know about the situation in Bangladesh's garment sector. I just want to emphasize once again that the problems or challenges that I'm listing on this slide do not only apply to Bangladesh, but to the whole industry. What we're facing are persistent labor rights violations and environmental risks, a lack of independent rights holder-driven data for effective risk assessment, and a lack of functional grievance mechanisms and communication structures. So we have grievance mechanisms in place, but most of them are not as functional as we would like them to be. And we also do not really have equal dialogue between different stakeholders, such as affected workers, businesses, and government actors. Why did we start this project? On the other side, we have increasing legal due diligence requirements for companies. For example, if we take a look at the German Supply Chain Act, which requires a thorough risk analysis and preventive measures. Or if we take a look at CSDDD on European level, which is hopefully still to come, that emphasizes stakeholder engagement. This is something that we in our project not only emphasize, but actively live. Companies must ensure meaningful consultation with rights holders. So what we have is a need for data-driven rights holder-focused due diligence. And our goal in this project is to provide reliable insights through our rights holder-based monitoring mechanisms, which we are calling worker and community-based monitoring. We want to support due diligence efforts by improving transparency and accountability. We will implement and scale up concrete improvements at factory level using the results. And we will also use the results for dialogue, for example, with authorities to minimize pollution and health risks. Key to our approach is a multi-stakeholder partnership that involves many different local and international stakeholders, as you can see on this slide. For example, local trade unions and also brands. Through worker and community-based monitoring, we create awareness and facts. And special about our partnership is that we take into consideration environmental, living, and working conditions, because these are all interconnected. We are living the intersectional approach. Based on the facts that we create through our rights holder-focused monitorings, we will establish sustainable dialogue structures between all stakeholders on eye level. Both social and environmental risks are closely intertwined in the textile industry, and this is where the strength of our project approach lies. We are addressing the challenges that I mentioned earlier through rights holder-focused data collection in Sabah, Bangladesh, specifically via worker and community-based monitoring, or WBM and CBM. The insights gained from both approaches will not only inform risk assessments, but also serve as a foundation for establishing sustainable dialogue structures between all stakeholders. These structures are essential to ensuring that findings translate into concrete improvements on the ground. Beyond that, we are also committed to raising awareness and advocating for better due diligence, both in Bangladesh and in Europe. In the following slides, I'll briefly introduce these key project parts to you before my colleagues then provide deeper insights and before we head to the plenary discussion. What is worker-based monitoring? In order to obtain reliable data, we conduct interviews with workers outside of the factories where they are able to speak more freely in order to get an authentic picture of how their situation at factory level is. This rights holder-driven data will then be used by trade unions who, in dialogue with factory management, will work to improve the situation. Responsible for the worker-based monitoring within our project are WageIndicator, BLF, BILS, and they're supported by Mondial F&B. The textile industry also has an impact on the surrounding communities. Many workers live close by. That's why, in addition to the data collection in factories through worker-based monitoring, within our project, we take a look into 3 selected communities where residents are empowered to collect and document environmental risks and health hazards, for example, skin issues or water pollution. Additionally, soil, water, and hair samples are also taken that provide insights on the environmental situation in the community. The data will then be used in consultation with authorities to improve the situation for residents. The responsible project partners for this are ESDO and Hej Support. So we have a combination of worker and community-based monitoring, where rights holders are put at the center. We know what their current situation is, and based on this data, we will then take remedial action. Besides the monitoring approach, we focus on awareness and advocacy in Bangladesh and beyond. And one example for this is the incident website. It documents incidents within the textile and garment sector in Bangladesh, as well as other important production countries. And therefore, it is a tool for identifying existing challenges and risks in the textile sector that should, as a next step, be eliminated. Our cases have a link to the brands, multi-stakeholder initiatives, and sustainability standards if known. And we invite you to use this website in order to track your own risks and, as a next step, eliminate them. Please note, we do not list all cases, but rather focus on incidents that highlight the biggest challenges and problems. We also invite you to send us suggestions for other possible cases that should be included on the website. You can access it via the QR code or the link in the chat. And the responsibilities for this part of the project lie with Südwind, Inkota, FEMNET, and Hej Support. Now you might ask yourself how you can engage. To make this project even more successful, you can support and participate in our data collection. We're actively looking for more stakeholders to join. From my perspective, this project is one of the few truly promising solutions when it comes to strengthening the agency of rights holders. It creates real opportunities for affected workers and communities to voice their concerns and be heard in due diligence processes. If you want to know whether your factory is already covered under our first round of data collection or check out whether you can join for the next round, please get in touch with us now. You can see the contact details on this slide. It will also be shared again at the end and then sent around with a follow-up mail. Please also stay informed via the 2 websites that I've mentioned here, mywage.org.bd from WageIndicator and our incident website. And of course, we would love for you to join our pilot project. So if you're interested in that, please also get in touch with us. And with that, I'm handing the mic back to you, Lavinia.
Thank you, Louise, for this very short but very intense, lots of information, a deep overview of the project partners and the generic approaches. I see that a lot of folks in the audience are engaging in the chat box. Love to see this. Please keep interacting, exchanging ideas, posing questions, sharing emojis, and so on and so forth. And now I would like to pass the mic to Nadia from WageIndicator and Ashraf from the Bangladesh Labour Foundation. And they will share about the work on worker-based monitoring, WBM, which is critical, very, very, very critical in amplifying workers' voices. And the approach basically, how I understood it, fosters shaping real-world solutions, practical real-world solutions on the ground. So let's dive into how this approach empowers workers and what key insights have emerged from the process. Nadia and Ashraf, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you, Lavinia. Sorry, participant. Due to low internet connection, I cannot show my video. So hi, everyone. Ashraf and I are here today to present on behalf of all the organization involved in this project that Luis had shared. So in the presentation, we'll walk you through the entire cycle of worker-based monitoring from the data collection to impactful negotiation. So our workers-based monitoring cycle starts with those who matter the most and knows the challenges best, which are workers, trade unions, and communities. So first, we form a core group with them, ensuring their active involvement in all the process. With their local knowledge, they help us carefully select the garment factories to be surveyed. In this factory, workers participate in a decent work check to assess their working condition against the national labor laws. But data only powerful if it's used, right? So the trade union and communities will be equipped with extra skills to use the data to negotiate with their employers or even influence the government and brands policies. So the goal here is to turn worker-driven data into real actions. So finally, we monitor the progress to follow-up surveys, whether we check whether the agreement made during the negotiation turns into the real improvement for the workers. Next, please. Okay, so between mid-October 2025 and January 2026, the BLF team has conducted decent work check surveys across a small ready-made garment cluster in Australia. A total of 51 RMG factories participate, interviewing 1,580 workers. Our 10 enumerators conducted the interview that covered 8 labor topics, and we make sure to have sample of minimum 30 workers per factories with diverse representation on the workers. And everything was done with a full worker consent and confidentiality. Okay, so Ashraf from the BLF will tell you further on the experience on the field and when they conducted the surveys and also the findings that they have. Please, Ashraf.
Are you there, Ashraf?
I'm sorry.
All good. The floor is yours. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Nadia. And thanks everyone for attending these site sessions. Let's start with something what we have received from the field reaction from the worker survey. What we have seen in the field, like most of the workers are actually living in a very unhygienic and overcrowded places. We even see the factory surroundings are also polluted, and there is a sewage leakage and polluted water bodies by factory effluents. And most of the workers are actually living in a very congested places with 3 and 4 people sharing in one room. And since these types of surveys we are quite new to Bangladesh, and workers are very curious on this survey, and they have asked so many clarifications. And one challenge we have faced that, the workers are actually living in very close by each other. So workers keep asking, the untargeted workers been asking us that why they are not actually interviewing. So they feel deprived, and they have actually think they are actually helpless. And many workers are actually dissatisfied with their wages, and low income opportunities significantly reduce their total income, making it hard to support their families. And for many, overtime, the period we have actually conducted our survey, the overtime rate was low. So the overtime is not is extra income, but which is very important for their survivals. But if they do not have overtime, they cannot live their life. Can you go to next slide, please? Yeah. This slide is quite interesting. I think these are the consolidated outcomes of our data, what we have gathered, as Nadia mentioned. that on 8 labor topics like employment security, fair treatment, health and safety, right to organize, social security, wages, women rights, and working hours. We have analyzed the data. And these data, I have to mention it again, is a small cluster we have actually gone through with only 51 factories, where there is more than 4,000 RMG factories in whole Bangladesh. And what we have found that the major highlights that the fair treatment and women rights, you can see from the figure, this like a fair treatment goes to 96% and women rights goes to 95%. I'll come to women workers side. I know lots of questions will asked by the audience. And another challenges still remains same, that the right to organize is 52%, it says, and social security is 37%. As I mentioned, that you can see that this is a consolidated data of many subtopics data. If I go through the next slides, then you can actually easily understand that what subtopics are actually got the compliance and what not. These slides, shows the high compliance data we have received from the factories, like wages are paid regularly. And one important thing that we did not find child labor in the factories, and there is no discrimination based on the religion. And no reported sexual harassment case in the past years. So you can see the 92.34%. So which is shows that the high compliance, but on the other hand, it shows that whether it is reported or non-reported. Like, we have discussed with some workers, they said that, if they do not actually complete the target, they are being harassed, but they don't think this is a harassment. They think that, okay, if I don't complete my target, people the supervisor will actually ask something on me. And occupational injury benefits are provided by the factories. It's not like the whole benefit will be provided is providing by the government, and rather sometimes the workers has to pay a portion of their expenditures. And we have found that the employment contracts has been provided to the workers, but it's still 82%. And another important issue is that most of the workers said that they are not forced to work over 60 hours a week. And one important things came to from this survey, that the severance is paid upon contract termination. But again, the workers said that many times the employers ask them to resign forcibly, and then the severance paid to the workers. So this is another concerning factors when we actually spoke with the workers in some areas. If I go to next slide, please. These slides, see the actually major issues, like when you see the right to organize, we have seen that 9% of the workers is still they said they are union members, and 20%, 7% workers say legally they can go for strike legally. Actually, that time we have actually collected data, the workers actually went to the street on their wage issues. They thought that is because of their unawareness. They thought that, okay, if they go to the street without any hassle, they thought that, okay, they have right to strikes. It's not like that they have right to strikes at factories or something like that way. And you can see that still we have declared the minimum wage year before, but still 28% of the factories are actually beyond implementing the minimum wage. And again, from the previous slide, you can see here that 42% of the workers actually mentioned that they are actually working more than 60 hours, which we call extra overtime. And 17% only 17% of the workers actually said that they get gratuity when they leave the job after a certain period of time. So this remains another critical point. And another important issue is that there is no social securities, any social securities for the workers who actually leaving the job after certain times for the old ages, or there is any no healthcare benefits for them. In my previous slide, what I mentioned that, GBB is often unreported, and female workers actually take verbal abuse, which is a very normal case inside the factories. This is some important topics what we have found from our data, and we are still reviewing the data. Actually, we are accumulating all the data. Maybe this data will be later published publicly as a summary. But if any brands actually interested to work more on this data, they may actually contact with us. Back to Nadia. Thank you very much for hearing me.
Okay, so for Bangladesh, we just finished analyzing the compliance data, so we don't have any experience on how we use the data yet, but we have done a similar approach in Indonesia, and it works. We saw real improvement, especially at the factory level. So workers and trade unions were engaged in our practical workshop. They learned how to use the decent work check to identify non-compliances. They learned how to access publicly available data online and also build a strong arguments based on the data, labor law, and also best practices from other companies' collective bargaining agreement. So the trade union successfully negotiate for the nursing room facilities and also secure improved breastfeeding rights in their collective bargaining agreement. So in Indonesia, we are slowly seeing a shift on how trade union negotiate. So from negotiating with muscle or using some confrontation to negotiating with data. So I quote trade union words on this. This changes was seen in the multiple factory level trade union. This is only one of the examples that I share with you today. So yeah, you can discuss more in the panel, I think. Next.
Yeah, Nadia?
Yeah.
Approximately 1 more minute to go.
Okay. So you successfully negotiate, but how exactly do we monitor everything's actually changed, right? So to track the progress, we conduct another round of decent work checks surveys. We asking the workers if the agreed improvements are actually in place. And with the consent of the unions and factories, this result can even be made public in the factory page and the wage indicator websites. So if you take a look at this screenshot of a certain factory page in Indonesia, over time, you can see a clear shift in several areas or subtopics, moving from non-compliance, if you see that orange on the right side, to compliance, to all the green in the left side. So yes. And then can I just next? Okay, so basically this worker-based monitoring approach offers lots of things. It makes information on working condition easily accessible. It helps trade union and factories to negotiate more fairly. And it's also bring real transparency and accountability across the supply chain. And with that in mind, we would like, as Ashraf said, we would like to expand this approach, bringing more factories and brands also on board with this approach. So what's next? Of course, we need your help to amplify this impact. Please use the data, advocate for changes, and also, most importantly, support local trade unions and communities as they push for improvements. So yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Nadia and Ashraf, for these insights on worker-based monitoring. So now we've covered worker-based monitoring. And as you can already see in the chat box, there's loads of super interesting questions. I would love to already jump into Q&As, but we have much more content to cover. But the audience, you can all help us, and specifically Dani, my colleague, monitoring the chat box and preparing the questions for the Q&A later. So if you like a question, if you think this is essential and fundamental, just click like or use an emoji so we see the accumulation in the chat box with regard to the question. And this way we can better, organize the Q&A later. And now I am happy to introduce Shahryar from ESDO Bangladesh. Thanks for being here with us as well. And your work, so now we are going to jump into community-based monitoring. We are now coming from worker-based monitoring, and we are going to have a look at community-based monitoring and how this sheds light on the environmental and health challenges faced by communities near factories, highlighting the urgent need for environmental justice. So let's explore the key findings and how this approach drives meaningful change. And I have already seen a question in the chat box where somebody was asking, it would be like really interesting to compare the results of the worker-based monitoring with actual audit results. So in the case of community-based monitoring, it's a different scenario because we normally don't have actual data from audits. So Shahryar, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. And as Lavinia mentioned, that we are working on this project in two parts: worker-based monitoring and community-based monitoring. So I'm sharing about our experience or work in this community. Next slide, please. So we started with the activities as outlined here, the community mapping to identify the community, sample collection, particularly for the contamination and contaminated site, CBM toolkits. It is an important toolkits for the community monitoring. And we have consulted with the community and the local authorities, national authorities, workers, and other professionals. And this is a process of continuous discussion meeting. And we have developed some information, education, and communication materials in this process. Next, please. Community mapping actually is an important part of this process. We are trying to identify, gain deeper understanding about the community and residents nearby the factories. And as you know that most of the workers are living in these communities around the factories. We are selecting 3 communities. Previously, our colleagues described the project location and activities. So this is the most important part of the activities. We try to mapping the whole community in the process. And the idea is to collect sample, identify the environmental impacts, health impacts, socioeconomic dynamics, and finalize for location of the sample collection. So in this process, we are working with, primarily we are selecting and discuss with the 5 international labs. They have the facilities to test the water, soil, and some cases, bio monitoring sample. So we have selected 2 labs primarily, and additionally 1 international labs, that is National Institute of Minamata Disease. And it is important to select this Minamata lab for the mercury analysis. And many of you already knows that the mercury is the huge body burden for the human beings. And that is why we are trying to see the scenarios of the mercury presence in the workers and the communities. And the Minamata lab is the only lab in Asia Pacific region to analyze the hair sampling for mercuries. So next slide. For soil sampling testing, you can see the pictures. We are collecting soil and water from the community around the 3 different communities, and you can see the situation of the canals situation. You can imagine how horrible situation is around the community, and definitely it is a kind of reverse scenario about the worker-based to the community-based monitoring. So this is the real scenario, real situation of the community where the workers are living. And every day they're facing a lot of the problems, so that it is found that this project has the need to identify the contaminants and contaminated site and what are the impacts of the health and environment. So next slide, please. So after the collection of the samples, we have analyzed the 3 rounds of samples, and it is the process maintained with the international protocol. And we have collected sample in 3 different seasons: pre-monsoon, monsoon, and post-monsoon season. So that we can analyze, we can find that actual situation of the soil, water, and the air as well. So this is a 3rd round sampling collection is finished, and we have the primary result we have in our hand, and it is really alarming situation. So next slide. The lab analysis recorded the heavy metal and toxic chemicals found in the water and soil. And these are the toxic heavy metals and chemicals are determine the high level of exposure, and all the heavy metals and chemicals found the more accessible limit. This is the permissible, more than permissible limit. Most of the cases, I can example you, the lead is the huge contaminant, and for the huge body burden, lead and cadmium. And generally, the permissible limit of the lead in soil is 0.01 ppm. But we found 114 ppm. Just you can imagine, this is heavy and high level, and same to the water as well. And the cadmium, chromium are the same. PFOS is a very high presence, and you know that PFOS is the mixture of different chemicals, and we have analyzed the 7 chemicals under the PFOS, and that 5 are detected high exposure in the water and soil as well. So we are still working on the mercury because the hair sampling is going on. This is a very comprehensive and technical methods. We are now preparing to collect the hair sampling from the community. As you know, this is some myth in our country that women are not ready to give their hair as sample. And so it is very difficult to convince them, and why we're collecting their sample, hair sampling. So, and somebody is asking, you are going to do this black magic. So it is very difficult situation. But finally, after last 4 months, we have struggling to convince the communities. And now we have get the consent of 31 community members, women's, they agree to give their sample. We will collect their sample end of this month, and then we'll send it to Minamata, Japan. And hopefully it will take some time. After 1.5 months, we will get the result. So this is the general situation that we found at the stage. And after compilation of the data, all the records, we will start preparing the report, and our colleagues from the Hej Support, they will prepare the report And hopefully we will compile the report and finish the report by the next 2.5 months. The next. And in this process, as already mentioned, that we have tried to engage all stakeholders in this process. So we have conducted the inception workshop. Inception workshop is always important in our context in Bangladesh to inform the local authorities, inform the national authorities, inform the workers, inform the stakeholders. So this is a kind of kick-off process to validate the project activities. So we have successfully validated our inception workshop with the highest level of participation from the government, labors, local communities, and other stakeholders. And still now we have some difficulties, but we are getting a lot of support from all stakeholders in this process. Then next slide. And we have created the container group. The container group is an important part of this process. And we have selected the professionals group in this part. This is from the government, local government, labor union, local community. So it consists with the members from these different groups, and they are actually guiding and assist us to implement the process. So time to time, we sit together, we share our activities, and they suggest us, we keep it in the account of their suggestion, and time to time, we involve them in the field activities as well. And most of the cases, we get a lot of positive support from them. Next. This is another important issues that I mentioned, that the community-based monitoring toolkits. These toolkits we have adopted from international toolkits, and it is developed in the local language in Bangla. And this is an important part of this activities on this project. This toolkit will help to process, to identify, to monitor the health, environmental conditions, and how that can be improve the condition, and how we could link up with the facilities that already have provided by the local government and the national government. So this is an important, and these toolkits we have trained the community volunteers. Actually, they are implement these toolkits in their community. We select the young volunteers from the communities, both men and women. And this is the part of their training and capacity building process. And now we have selected 20 group of young men and women volunteers. They are now working in the community to use these toolkits. And this toolkit is guided clearly how they can collect information, how they can reporting mechanism, how they can identify the symptom of disease, and how they can monitor or indicate that their environment is going to contaminate it, the water is going to contaminate it, soil is going to contaminate it. The next slide, please.
Shadiad, 1
Yes.
minute to wrap it up.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but it's so interesting. I'm really struggling to interrupt you.
Okay, no problem. Go back, please. Next slide. Next slide. Next one, please. So this is the final slide about the toolkits, and this toolkits is the chapter in different issues that we are highlighted. The impact of the hazardous chemicals, environment pollutions, human health, and food chains, how it is impacted, and the techniques, how they can collect a sample, what is the reporting mechanism, sampling mechanism, and also we are highlighted the regulations and the rules already exist and what are need to be improved, what need to be rectified. And the list of the symptoms, body burden is also created here. Finally, I wanted to say that we are in a very short time. It is very primary initiatives, and so we need to improve this situation together. I believe this is a serious issue, not only for the Bangladesh, for all developing countries. And if we could improve this situation, if we could make it happen as a model, that could be replicated around the world. I hope we will achieve our goal working together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Shariar, for these insights. Yeah, there was one very emerging question in the chat box, but I think we're going to talk about this in the panel later regarding primary data and how far all of this is comparable to the existing data sets, which I tend to call biased existing primary data sets, because, yeah, the factory floor is biased, audit mechanisms are biased, and so on and so forth. But I think we're going to talk about this and discuss this later on in more depth. So thank you all for the insightful presentation so far. Yeah, I think it was a lot of disruptive and thought-provoking input if we compare these approaches to generic monitoring tools, right? So everybody who has been working either, you know, in auditing and or as a CSR manager or at an international NGO trying to define corrective action measures knows that we have major challenges in our industry, and we are actually very, very, very far away from proper problem understanding and problem solving. Before we jump into the exchange and the panel discussion, I would like all of us to take 1 minute. I'm going to put the timer. 1 minute of silent reflection. Just quietly reflect on the following questions so that our brains and hearts, you know, get even a little more interactive. And these questions serve or are designed to serve as further intervention and interrogation for the Q&A later. The questions are, what challenges do you think workers and communities face in participating in monitoring processes? And how can we ensure that monitoring data leads to actionable change? 1 minute. I'm going to put the timer now. So that 1 minute of reflection is over. A lot is going on in the chat box. Interesting, interesting. But now let's move to the panel discussion, where we'll dive deeper into the intersection of worker-based monitoring and community-based monitoring. And our panelists will share their perspectives on how these approaches contribute to stronger, due diligence processes, and address challenges in global supply chains. We'll start with a few prepared questions, and then we'll open the floor to your questions from the chat. Daniela, my colleague, will be monitoring the chat and sharing your questions with me. So let's keep this dynamic and focused so we can cover as much ground as possible in our limited time today. I would like to welcome, and maybe the panelists, you can use some emojis, some reactions, so the audience can identify you. The participants of the panel, the honorary participants are Sultan Ahmed from BILDS Bangladesh. Then there's Naimul Ashan Jewel from GCOP Bangladesh. Very honored to also have a trade unionist among us, with us today. Then Shariar Hossain, which you just got to know, from ESDO Bangladesh, and Alexandra Katabo from Hej Support International. So the first question, let's start with Sultan from BILDS on project design and integration. Let's start a little bit at the meta level. We heard a lot about, specifically recently from Shariar, about environmental protection, health, and before we heard a lot about labor rights. And all of this in generic auditing and impact assessment scenarios is addressed separately, right? So how did the consortium, the different project partners, design this project that integrates worker-based monitoring and community-based monitoring to tackle these interconnected challenges? Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Thank you very much, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to listening to all of you. A very good initiative, I would like to say. And I should say this is a very unique initiative. So far as I know, maybe this is one of the first initiatives with the combination of the workers-based management and community-based management. Also, I can say that it's a unique model also, that how workers can be empowered to deal with their own grievances and linked with their rights and environment. I'm sorry, I could not go actually in details that how this project shaped to design this thing, but I know there are a lot of discussion, study and everything. But so far as I understand, that was a necessity. Actually, having environment and workers are separate, especially in the working area, industrial cities, that was a wrong approach for a long time. So I, instead of saying that how this project actually shaped, I would like to say these project partners made a realistic steps, and which is reality, which is actually necessary, that workers-based management and community-based management, because workers are staying in the workplace maybe from 10 to 12 hours. If I include the overtime, as Ashraf mentioned, that workers also expect overtime, but another 12 hours they stay in the home, in the community, in the area. And many of our study says that how the environment are actually degrading, and how the other social environmentals, not only I'm saying that river, water, soil and everything, even socially they are facing a lot of problem, which we need community engagement. So this project actually, they had what we listen from the second presentation, that how they manage the things about the data collection, everything. So I feel that this is a very realistic approach and very necessary approach to do this thing. Second, I should say that in BILDS and BLA, both are actually, I'm saying these two organizations because I know them very well. So they have the trade union connection. And we have the local community mobilization before that also, especially the green community mobilization and everything. So whenever BILDS design any program, or an organization like BLF design on any program, we always consider that how trade union can engage, how workers can engage a lot, maybe not within factory level at the community level. So that is the another element which help the project partners all together. I'm saying all the partners, that how we can integrate these two approaches together. And third, what I would like to say, that without combining or integrate these two approaches together, you cannot make any change. Because workers' rights, even inside the factory, is also related with many environmental issues. If workers not empowered with the environmental issues, then they cannot actually place their demand, also place their grievance, which is one of the major elements of these projects, that workers will understand the individual approach, their grievances, and they can put forward their grievances. So inside the factory, there are many environmental issues. From the factory, there are many issues which contribute to the environmental damage. That's also workers need to talk, especially the trade union need to talk. And so how when we can integrate it, when we can relate the workers-based approach to community-based approach, factory inside approach to community approach, then it will be a unique activities, unique joint efforts to initiate the change. So this is one area where, so far as I understand about the whole discussion. And another thing is that in Bangladesh context, if I tell, it is difficult to address one single problem isolatedly. It's all are related, integrated with one problem to another.
Not only in Bangladesh. It's the world we live in.
So I understand this everywhere, but in our case, it is very important because, the industrial belt where we are serving, where the workers are staying, it's not a planned industrial belt. In 60s, we had some industrial belt which is built on very planned way. We have all the workers' facilities, colony, workers' quarter, playground, and everything. But this Ashulia, Shabar, Gazipur, these areas, even some areas of Naranganj, it's actually not built as a planned way. Workers gather there, people buy the land, and they build the factories without considering anything. Environment, society, and everything. Last Friday I was in Ashulia belt.
Well, considering profit, right?
To meet with the workers, and they're saying that they are suffering, that their children are in insecure position because they went to regularly, they go to the factory, and evening they come back. They don't know how they are, especially the adolescent child, they're staying there and their education and everything. So that is another problem, that these all industrial built spontaneously by purchasing land, a small piece, establishing a factory, and then workers gather there. Some people, those who have the land, they build the tin shed, slum-like household, and they are staying there. So these are the issue you need to solve by a community mobilization, by a community initiative. You cannot solve individually. So that's another area. And for this community mobilization, you need actually a workers mobilization also. And not only workers, even I would like to say factory owners also. So there is a necessity in these areas where we need community-based approach, workers-based approach, and joint efforts. But challenge is there, but I feel that this model, individual empowerment and everything, if we cannot integrate with the trade union and factory-based others committee who can represent workers, who can protect workers when they will represent themselves, when they will raise any concern or grievances, then it will be a question of their individual safeguard or individual job security and everything. Because in our environment, people are not very much respectful to the individual grievance. They always consider the collective grievance, and always think that individual grievance means they are isolated, they are weak person. So I think one of the element we need to consider how this workers-based monitoring system can be based on the collective monitoring. That means the union or safety committee or participation committee, whatever we say, it should be a structured way. And how this factory-based committee can jointly work with the community-based community, and how we can engage other actors of the community also, like government officials, other departments. I think at the
on
first
somehow, like on some level, there's like this necessity for structure, but on the other hand, because of the diversity of the communities and the landscapes, there's also a certain flexibility necessary, right? What is basically done in the project, right?
Yeah, but it should be lead to collective efforts. It should lead to a
Of course.
structural level.
Always. Yeah. Okay. I would love to jump even deeper into, the project design and how the collective understands integration. But yeah, with a look at the clock at the time, thank you very much, Sultan, for your expert opinion and elaborating on this. What I understood and what I found really interesting that you said at the beginning, that there was a necessity. So the necessity was already there, and folks have actually communicated this necessity for a very long time, right? And then also bringing it in line with one of the comments from the chat box, somebody wrote lack of voice. And whenever somebody says or writes lack of voice, I actually like to quote Arundhati Roy. There's a beautiful quote from her where she says, there is no voiceless. There is no voiceless, but there are folks being silenced, right? And this is generally happening on the factory floor and also on the community level. All right, now let's dive into data collection and utilization. There have been a lot of questions on data gathering, evaluation, and assessment approaches already in the chat box. And I would like to start with Shahriar from ESDO. If you could elaborate on kind of how does the data collected through WBM and CBM, worker-based monitoring and community-based monitoring, support companies in meeting their due diligence obligations, particularly under the CSDD. And yeah, maybe afterwards, Alex from Hej Support could add on here. Shahriar, please.
Thank you. And actually, to collect the data, and we are very seriously maintained the protocols and the validation process, participation, the equal participations of the gender-based approach, community-based approach, worker-based approach. So you can see that, and we are trying hard that no one should be behind in this process. So at least we can say that we are trying hard to include all community members, the workers in the selected factories in this process, and to talk about their opinions and the accurate data and data validations is doing in the independent mechanism. And particularly, we can say that for the community-based monitoring, and we collected the sample. It is a random sample collection in the first phase, and second phase, we are collected sample in highlighting and identifying the contaminated site. And that site already visible as a contaminated site. And I can mention that the Nayanjali Khal in Ashulia, it's well known. And this canal was the bloodstream for the community about 2 decades ago. Now, this canal is a burden for the community because this canal water is totally contaminated. And there is no water for use, no water for drink, no water for irrigations. So if you can visit that area, you can see, you can generally identify this is a highly contaminated place. So we identify the contaminated site, we use the GPS tracking mechanism and all possible GRS and GPS system to validate the process. So I can say that we have trying our best to collect the accurate information, accurate sampling, and that's sent to the different lab. And for the lab, we have very strict, and we are not going to compromise with anyone. And because we are not strict with the one lab, we are strict in 3 different labs. And now we are thinking that this is not enough. We would like to add more analysis. And now we are planning to do some immediate field level analysis mechanism that we are now conducting with another lab in Philippines. They have the expertise for XRF analyzing. So that can be immediately give you the result. So hopefully we are signing the agreement with that lab, and after the Ramadan, the next month, we will conduct that kind of field analysis activities again. At least we can say that we have tapped all possible ways, all possible instrument and mechanism to collect and validate the data.
Great. Thank you so much, Shariar. Alex, how would you respond to this? Anything to add here, specifically with regard to CSDDD? I guess a lot of folks might be asking this.
Yes. So, first of all, I would like to say that although I'm a project partner, I'm always amazed about our project, because it's one of the very few projects that combine like the social topics, the labor topics with the environment topics. That is quite unique, I have to say. And it also reflects very well that the UN General Assembly in July 2022 has decided that the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is actually a human right, finally. So when we talk about human rights, we also now talk about environment, a healthy environment. And this is often forgotten. So we all know that we are facing multifaceted problems here. And these can only be solved if we think outside our silos and cooperate. And we know that there's already a lot going on in audits and data on the worker-based part, which is great, and we contribute a lot to this. But for the environmental part and the community-based monitoring, we are pretty pioneering in this project. So of course, what we do is based on tests. Tests are not new, and we have a toolkit. The toolkit is also based on an existing one. However, bringing all this together is very unique, and we hope that we can build on this in the future and make it like a real, roll it out more general and more steady. And I also want to say that due diligence and responsibility do not stop at the factory door. Companies are also responsible for harm caused outside the factory, such as environmental pollution and health effects of communities close to their production sites. So therefore, with the toolkit that the project developed, this toolkit really empowers communities to collect data by themselves, so they learn how to do it, and then to know about also potential legal entry points. So who do I have to address if I have a contaminated soil? And this is, of course, also very interesting for companies, because, as I said, due diligence doesn't stop at the factory door. And overall, what has coming back to your question, Lavinia, of course, due diligence and also supply chain regulation has to deal with environmental topics. Often it's a bit overlooked, especially also the chemicals part of it, but this has to be strengthened. And with project like ours, we provide tools and data that companies can rely on, because we really strictly stick to international standards here. And yeah, for now, I hope I answered your question.
Definitely, both of you. Obviously, because you're more focused on the community-based monitoring and the environmental aspects. And therefore, maybe Fiona from WageIndicator, we hadn't planned it, but maybe you could elaborate like super shortly, because we are already a little bit behind time. What about worker-based monitoring?
Hi, Lavinia. Can you please, repeat again, because I was busy writing answers in the chat. So I didn't
Oh, I'm so
completely follow
sorry.
on.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I was just contacted by Danny, who was asking me to also include you. Now, we're talking about how does the collected data, right, in this project support companies in meeting their due diligence, specifically with regard to CS-DDD. And Shariat and Alex already gave spectacular answers, opened like basically a new universe for us. But could you also elaborate like super shortly on like worker-based monitoring, because obviously both of them have been focusing on community-based monitoring.
Yeah, so I think it's a bit of an early question to answer, actually, because I think we are in the middle of trying to explore what worker-based monitoring can do and how it can inform companies within their due diligence. So it's a relevant question, I think, to ask, but also something that we are trying to explore together, also in the context of this partnership. The reason why I'm saying that, and that's also part of the questions that were asked in the chat that I was trying to respond to, is that we of course have a representative sample per factory of the working population in the factory. So we have a representative sample of the ratio male-female workers, migrant workers, contracted, not contracted, full-time, part-time, all of that, which we try to use to get an understanding of the level of compliance on labor law within the factory. But the purpose of our data is not to perform or change social audits or replace social audits. The purpose is to use that data to strengthen social dialogue. And I think that's an important difference to make, because there are a lot of social audits happening there with the increased due diligence regulations. You'll see that many companies are looking for ways to understand what's happening in factories. And we hope that our data can both inform brands about what's happening in factories. That's also part of the reason why we, of course, have all of our data open. So it's open and public, so people can look at it. But at the same time, we think our data, and especially the worker-based monitoring data, is more to be used for meaningful stakeholder engagement rather than replacing social audits. That is because it is there to strengthen, first and foremost, social dialogue within the country and within the sector. With that, we hope that can also, for brands, improve their meaningful stakeholder engagement within Bangladesh and within the sector there, rather than seeing this as a replacement of social audits.
Super. Thank you so much for wrapping this up, Fiona. I'd anyways would love to dig deeper into worker and community perspectives, because again, in this panel, well, not only in this panel, but the whole session, I feel our collective obsession with data. You know, it's like 70% of the questions in the chat box are about data and the quality of data. Yeah, therefore, I would love to open the floor now for the work and community perspectives, you know, the perspectives from the ground. And I would love to hear from Naimul Ahsan. Jewel, are you there? Awesome. Hi, nice to have you with us. Could you share a little bit how the project works in terms of like what is different? How is the dialogue different? How is ownership different? How are power structure different? Do you think that rights holders have a different role and more power in this project?
সঠিক রোল প্লে করতে পারতেছি কিনা এই প্রজেক্টের মাধ্যমে
Thank you for question. Thank you for a good opportunity to join us this program for the worker side. Workers-based monitoring is now approach to us for the trade union and created a scope for the evidence-based dialogue. Local trade union often lacks data and evidence which make collective bargaining and advocacy and initiative challenging workers-based monitoring approach amongst those difficulties. I want to highlight the assessment tools used in the project. Decent work check, creation about the core sector in Bangladesh, national legal framework, so it created good evidence for the local trade union to see the role of labor standard in the factories. With the findings of the decent work check for the collective bargaining, dialogue and negotiation will be highly effective and outcoming based.
Outcoming based, you said, right? Interesting.
Yes.
Acha.
The trade union themselves and also the work need to be educated about this right. HRDD approach and requirements in the project. Capacity of LAC unions will be enhanced through theoretical and problem-based workshop, and in the turn there will raise awareness among the workers on the issue of their rights, workplace safety, etc. based of the negotiation. Once the workers are educated and aware of these rights and means they reporting, then they can further sharing their role, time, situation about the rights, safety, and any dispute. The sectoral and national federation through the local trade union can mobilize and encourage the workers to share first-hand information on workplace condition along role time identification of this issue. I would also like to mention that environment issue also have a great stake in the project, and these are also core issue for workers. through the joint intervention, trade union and the community have the opportunity to exchange and support each others also. From the learning of this project, trade union can include every movement and related mobilization advocacy in their mainstream activities. If I ask you about the challenges, I want to say the Bangladesh is the organizing efforts, and trade union participants are very limited in the R&D sector. We have less than 10% organized workforce for R&D sector also. Most of the workers are still not very aware of their core rights.
Yeah.
There are problems, but we have enough opportunity to work together. Where I want to highlight the workers-based monitoring is not only the responsibility of trade union. It requires collective action involving workers, TUs, factories, management, buyers, and policymakers, which like trade unions can serve as a trade union can serve as a backbone of this process. They can ensure that work voice and are heard. Violence are documentary and necessary action are taken of the long-term improvement in the R&D sector.
Super.
Thank you.
Naimal, I need to interrupt you, unfortunately, although I think we would all like to hear more, but because of time.
Okay, thank you for
no, thank you for sharing all of this.
This is very helpful for our worker side. This is very helpful, but this is fully new scope for workers. This type of project and this type of work. This
yeah, right.
Workers.
Yeah.
Our workers will identify the which things is lacking for the workers' rights. They have to ensure their rights and their gaps inside the factory, and also community base also.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the focus is and should be on them.
Thank you.
To lower the burden, absolutely. But anyways, like from what I heard from you was like that thanks to these joint efforts, I do hear out a little bit that power structures are shaken a little bit. It's new, right?
Yes.
And in some instances uncertain, but power structures are definitely shaken. Yeah. Thank you. So time, Q&A. Danny, what do you have for me for the panelists or the consortium? What super emerging questions arose, which we did not yet address?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for all the questions. There were many of them. So there's a lot of interest in our project, which is nice. I think thanks to Fiona also in the background, we actually managed to cover most of them. But I think there's a real interest in finding out how the questions are actually designed, especially with regard to sensitive issues such as gender-based violence, for example. And on the other hand, how rights holders are actually really included. So maybe this is the two questions we can look a little bit more into. So on the one hand, how is the data actually collected? Are there concrete examples, for questions of the survey regarding gender-based violence? And in the end, how are rights holders really informed about those results, and how are they included in the survey and in the monitoring tools? So these three questions, I think, sum up all the questions of the chat. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. So first question on data sets and data quality. And I think once we answered that question, we can go into the rights holders because obviously it overlaps. Who would like to answer the data question? How are questions designed?
I can give a small answer on this, but I think most of that I've already covered in the chats. But
Yeah, but
so,
for the ones who did not read the chat.
yeah, exactly. So the Decent Work Check is the survey tool that we use to do the first compliance check with workers in the factories or outside the factories in this case. And those questions are completely based on nationally applicable and EPZ labor laws. So they're basically a yes and no question check to see whether or not rights are respected. So it's a quite simple but very long survey because we want to be elaborate, we want to make sure that we cover all of the laws in the questionnaire. Of course, after that, so after the initial survey, so the survey design is very much based on the national labor law. It's a legal check, basically, whether rights are respected, yes or no. So also the questions around sexual harassment and gender-based violence are according to women's rights. That being said, and I think that is also something that Ashraf addressed in his presentation already, because we talk to the workers face to face, so we don't do an online survey, but we really talk to them. We also hear their actual lived experience, which is often different than whether or not their rights are respected, yes or no. So what we hear from some of the survey designs, and I hope that Ashraf can actually shed some extra light on this as well, is that many women experience gender, like sexual harassment, but also harassment at the work floor in terms of verbal violence as normal. So they they have sort of, it's part of their job in general. So it's an important thing to address in terms of how do we make sure that it's a cultural change in the end, that this is not normal. So we try with the survey design to understand whether rights are respected, yes or no, and with the context in which we interview the workers, we try to make sure that we also understand what is behind their answer, and we also try to address that when we start working with the data to actually have social dialogues and negotiations to get talking about how to change the working conditions. So the survey is really the first step, after which we start engaging.
Yeah, so it's basically that you the design of the questions is based on contextualizing, right? What is
it's based on the law and understand on the local law.
But
and
the approach is contextualizing.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, with different intercultural.
And it's helpful that the survey is
the missing link.
No, but it's helpful that the survey is designed on the basis of the law, because then you can always start your conversation on the basis of that. And then, of course, because then there's no bias in law. I mean, there is obviously always a bias in law, but we can have many discussions about that on a later basis. But it's an easy start for a conversation because it's in the law. And then you can get going after that. But maybe Ashraf can shed some extra light on the surveys we've done with the workers, actually.
Yeah, I need to know. No, not in this session, unfortunately, because there's a lot of folks going to be leaving now in 1 minute because they will be jumping into other sessions. For that reason, Danny, I would love you to share already the contact details and everything in the chat box. In the follow-up email, just to inform you, there's going to be the recording and contact data and so on and so forth. The consortium, we are obviously going to stay until at least 5 minutes past the hour in order to keep on answering questions for everybody who has joined us today. Thank you so much for being here and being so critical and provocative and like engaging in the chat box and so on and so forth. I think it was really fun. Like in between, I was like, I would love to jump in the chat box, but no, I have to moderate. Now, final question from the audience, rights holders. How are they actually integrated? We talked a little bit about this, but
maybe I can come in, and then Tarja, you tell everything that I missed. Yeah, I mean, the work on the ground that our colleagues from ESDO are doing is actually involving rights holders from the beginning, and we are providing tools for rights holders. I mean, the community, the inhabitants are rights holders, and so this is like 100% A to Z rights holder involvement, and not just during the project, but also beyond the project duration. With the toolkit, they have something at hand where they can use to to measure, to take samples, and do it in a way that is also recognized and accepted. And so they can come with real evidence to the companies, to their local authorities, and this will drive change. So, yeah, Sharia, do you want to add, please?
No, actually, it's all right. As Alex says, that this is already taken in account for give the ownerships to the community of the project. So this project is a unique approach. We are trying to integrate the factory and the community together. So that means it is to address the issue of rights, gender, occupational health safety, environmental health, and social security together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shariar. And Louisa, would you like to share the last slide?
Yes.
Please. Yes, great. Folks are leaving. Feel free to say goodbye in the chat box. Yeah, over here you can see how you can further engage. And I want to thank you all for joining us today again. I think your engagement and insights have been invaluable. And yeah, have a great rest of the day and many more insightful chats and conversations during the OECD Forum. And let's continue this important work together. Bye-bye.